All right. We're here today for another Confessions of a Street Broker with my longtime Mexican brother.
Yes, sir.
Jesús Araiza. Let's go. Armada Capital Partners.
Yes, sir.
It's funny. I'm going to tell you something that you don't know. Somehow on my phone, you have been pinned at the top of my favorites forever. And I don't really know how to use favorites in my phone log. I just never used it, but somehow you got there. And my kids will always grab my phone and they're like, "Who's Jesus?" I go, "Who do you think it is?" It's Jesus.
That's funny. It's funny. So obviously I have a very unique name, and I went to Catholic schools growing up.
Yeah.
I went to Jesuit for high school. And a lot of jokes were made, obviously. I've been called every religious name in the book. And then you're not the first person to tell me that, when they call, I think iPhone, if you use the voice command.
Yeah.
Right? And I think if I call you, if you have it on, it'll say, Jesus is calling. And I've had a few people be like, "You called me," and I was in the car with my wife and my kids. And all of a sudden, we're like, "Oh God, you got to pick that one up."
Yeah. When Jesus calls, you answer.
Oh yeah. No, I actually, I went to Oklahoma 2 days ago, and driving up there, there's a billboard, and here, I don't want to be wrong in what the billboard said, but it was interesting. I was driving up there with a few of the people on my team. The billboard said, "Jesus is the answer to all of your problems." So anyway, there you go. I said it to my wife.
Someone calls you with something and you just send that back to them.
I remember, and so at Jesuit, there were these bracelets that were given, I think it was my senior year, and they said WWJD.
Yeah.
And it was like, what would Jesus do?
Right.
Right? And so anyway, it was funny. I had a ton of fun with that. It was like, and guys would just come up and ask me, "Hey, I've got this problem, this dilemma or situation going on. What would you do?"
Some bracelet marketing campaign made you like a therapist.
Yes, I was the high school therapist.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, man, it's been great. It's been great. Getting to know you. It's been. It was interesting. We met. When I was at Leon Capital, and you came in with Romy, and I think that's when we first met.
That was when we first met.
Mm-hmm. And I think Taylor Mitchum had told me about you because you knew Taylor before, and we met, and I knew about you just seeing your signs up, and just my dad is in the tortilla business, and he's got a warehouse, and
I'd called on your dad.
Yeah,
your
probably,
dad was in my
and a lot of the Mercer guys have called my dad over the years. But anyway, you gave me, I think after maybe grabbing lunch, you gave me a book. I think it was Relentless, right, that you gave me, which is a book that I've gone on to give to my guys. So thank you. And
it's a good book.
And it is, and I think you certainly embody, the main sort of theme of that book. So thank you for the book. And
I appreciate it.
And anyway, I've admired what you've done so far. It's been awesome.
Thank you. It's been fun. We've kind of parallel pathed a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's been interesting. It's been interesting.
And it's always fun to share notes and all those things.
Yeah.
Do you remember the second time we met? Do you remember this exchange?
No.
Okay. So me and Romy came in the first time.
Yeah.
And the second time I came in and talked with y'all without Romy.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And so I open up my laptop and you just go right at me. You're like, "Okay, so how do I know you're not going to bring this deal to Romy, or you and your brother are going to buy it and all this stuff?" And I was just like, "Fuck this."
I think,
and then you're like, no, sit back down.
Yeah.
And then it was like after that, we were like bros after that.
No, it's interesting. as I've gotten older and I've got 4 kids, I've got more patient, but that was a good thing, I think.
It was a good thing.
You know what I mean? Like, I think I knew at that point, I was like, this guy's for real.
Yeah.
And he's not bullshitting around. And what do you want me to say? There's a lot of sort of fakeness in this business. You know what I mean? So,
well, then from then on out, you're like my Aryan brother. You're skinhead.
Yes. No, dude, it's been you know, like I said, we've had personal conversations too, you know, here and there, and I appreciate, I think, your candor and your honesty, and to a degree, I think initially maybe I was like, you know, he's a competitor. How do I handle this competitor? And what do we do? And I think at the end of the day, it's like, you know, everyone's just here to provide for their family and their kids. And there's plenty of business out there for everybody.
There's you know, it's funny. I was actually over at Romy's the other day eating lunch with them.
Yeah.
And someone was like, oh, that's your, because I like, he's like, they have great swag that they send me, you know, and it's all like, I'm always wearing it. He's like, you know, I go, people are like, why are you wearing your competitor? I was like, he's not my competitor. And Romy's like, there's so much business to go around. Like,
I agree.
You can't, no one can eat it all.
I agree.
Well, let's just kind of start growing up. Let's kind of go through your whole story.
Yeah, man. So I have an interesting, I mean, you know, everyone's got obviously an interesting story in their own way. So I grew up in Oak Cliff in the 80s. Not the safest part of town, nor the ideal time, I guess, at the time in Oak Cliff. People today talk about Oak Cliff and it's Bishop Arts, right?
Yeah.
So it's become sanitized and cool, and And if you told people back then when I was growing up, Bishop Arts, I don't think anyone really knew what it was. It was just, you know, it was always there, but Oak Cliff is Oak Cliff. And so went to, my parents came in the late 70s, early 80s. I was born Methodist down in Oak Cliff. Went to school. If you think there's a rougher place in South Dallas, I went to school in West Dallas, which is over off of Singleton. I went to a little Catholic school called St. Mary of Carmel. And it was great. It was a great experience. It was a school mainly of children of mainly Mexican immigrants. And, you know, it was a neat thing. We had Irish nuns that were basically running the school, and a Spanish priest. And so it was great for somebody that learned. So I learned English. I think one of your questions was, what was an interesting thing about you, or what's something people don't know? Yeah. So I learned English in kinder. Yeah. It was interesting, right? So
you initially grew up just speaking Spanish.
Yeah, even though I was born here. Yeah. My world was in Spanish, and I went to like a pre-K for like a year, not at that Catholic school, somewhere else. And I just remember going to school, and as a little kid, you figure it out, but I did not understand a lot of what's going on. I mean, a lot of in pre-K, you're just outside playing and doing basic stuff, so it was easy. But in kinder, it was interesting. I remember this was kinder at St. Mary of Carmel, staying after school, because I would have to go through extra lessons just to kind of learn the language. Yeah. And it was sort of like an ESL program without sort of the ESL. They didn't have like a real structure. It was just like, I remember sitting down, looking at the board and going through like colors and sort of basic stuff on, this is how you say this word. And I was like, okay, and so anyway, it was neat. I went through 8th grade, went to Jesuit, had a fantastic time at Jesuit. Amazing place. There's a lot of real estate guys that have gone to that school. And then I went to Duke for undergrad.
So how'd you select Duke? First off, you got to be really smart to get into Duke. So everybody knows now. I guess, or you have to know someone, right? I didn't know anyone, obviously. Okay, so you're really smart.
I tried hard, I guess. I only applied. It's interesting. I only applied to one high school, which was Jesuit, and I only applied to one college, which was Duke.
Okay.
And my parents didn't know any better. It was just kind of like my parents didn't go to college. My dad's a self-made guy, entrepreneur, has a tortilla business. Yep. Still has it to this day in Oak Cliff. And so to us, it was just like just apply to one school, get in, and I got into both. But at Jesuit, I think Jesuit prepared me for Duke. I was looking for something that was similar to Jesuit, kind of a good balance of, extracurricular and academics.
Yeah.
At Jesuit, I wanted to get good grades, and part of it was that's just who I am. The other part was I want to make my parents proud, right? As immigrants, I think to me, I was very aware of, especially in high school, as you become more aware of kind of your reality, right?
Yeah.
I would get dropped off by my dad, and he had a tortilla delivery van. And so, I remember it was a little rough at times. I think sophomore, junior year, it was like kids were getting cars, and I was like the kid there standing, waiting to get picked up by the tortilla delivery van. You know what I mean? And so it was in high school when you have kids be assholes, and it was interesting going through that. But Duke, I think, was a great place for me. It was interesting. So my freshman year, first year, not a lot of people know this, but I almost failed out of Duke.
Really?
I had a pretty tragic thing happen. A cousin of mine who was like a brother passed away that summer right before, and I was just not there kind of mentally.
Yeah.
And so I was there that first semester, and I remember I was like getting C's, and I think I got a D, and that, for me, I was like, D is like, you're basically like, just get out. And so the second semester I got straight A's, and I remember just having gone through that first semester, which was really hard, just kind of mentally, and being away. My parents were here. I was pretty close to them. I have a younger sister who was actually born when I was a freshman in high school. Same parents, but she's 15 years younger. Yeah. And so I left, right? I went off to, I was the kid. My older brother went to Trinity in San Antonio. Yep. And so I went to Durham, and it was hard. But Duke was great. I mean, I didn't become a Cameron crazy. I never tented, but it was an amazing place. And since then, my little brother went to get his MBA. My sister got her master's of biomedical engineering. And then both of my wife's brothers got their MBAs after me. So,
is this all at Duke?
All at Duke.
Oh,
so
wow.
we have, there's a lot of Duke connections.
A lot of
there.
Blue Devils in the family.
Yeah. So it's been fun. We've had a fun season.
Yeah.
We have Cooper Flagg, who's pretty good.
Yeah. That's awesome. So what did you major in?
I did economics and public policy.
Okay.
Duke.
Is it a liberal arts school?
Yeah. So Duke did not have like a specific finance degree. It was, you were an econ major, and you could take like finance classes, but you got an economics degree, not a finance degree.
Yeah.
So I did that in public policy. Learned a lot about sort of cost benefit analysis on how cities work, government programs, which is interesting now being in real estate.
Yeah.
A lot of what we do, as you know, is we rely on cities, unfortunately, to give us permits.
Yeah, they're a business partner you don't really want to have, but are sometimes forced to have.
And they take their time, and they're not held accountable, I guess.
Yeah, there's no competition.
It's the city.
Imagine if they had to compete.
It's better. I mean, I love what Doge is doing right now. That's a needed thing, because as somebody who's in real estate, and you've gone through some of these cities, even in Dallas, which you could say we have more pro-business, leadership. Like you sometimes get the strangest requests from the city that delay your projects, and it all impacts at the end of the day economic development in the city, right?
Yeah.
And your ability to open, create jobs, all those things.
Sure. So you wrap it up at Duke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I graduated in 2004. This was pre-GFC.
Okay.
I didn't, honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I graduated. My dad's again in the tortilla business. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I interestingly sort of got into real estate by accident. So I had some student loans that I took out while I was there. And I applied to investment banking. I was dating a girl at the time that moved to New York, and I was like, maybe I'll go to New York, maybe not. We'll see. I was pretty close to my family, so at the time for me, it was important that I come back. My sister, who I left, and she was 4, right?
Yeah.
She was 8 when I graduated, and I was like, if I go off to New York or whatever, another city, I'll just be the brother that she never really knew.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I thought about that, and I was like, I'm going to go back to Dallas. So came back, didn't have any jobs lined up. I had the student loan sort of, deadline, the repayment in the back of my mind. And I ended up getting a job as a broker.
Yeah.
I was a broker for Coldwell Banker Commercial.
Okay.
And I ended up doing that for 6 months. I got that job through, interestingly, my older brother's friend, who's a guy that also came similarly from a tortilla background. Yeah. A guy named Rolando Leal, who's still a good friend and a great guy. So I was there 6 months, and it was interesting. Sort of halfway through my brokerage period, and this was Coldwell Banker Commercial, which is a small office. I don't even know if it exists today, but this was, I guess, post the CBRE. There was sort of a non-compete.
Yeah.
So it was a small office. There was a guy that did retail, office, hotel, just kind of, the team was small. It was like 8 guys. And we ended up, I ended up focusing on retail just because that was like, coming from sort of a restaurant, food manufacturing place. I was like, okay, makes sense.
Yeah. Understood it.
I guess I could have done industrial, right? Which was interesting if I would have done that path. But I did retail, and like halfway through, I think I'd made like $2,200 in, I think it was like month 4 or 5. Yeah. And I remember my student loans were coming up. I forget the deadline. They give you like a little bit of time to kind of start paying them. And I had to get an extension, because I didn't have enough money, right? I was a broker. I was making no money. I remember my dad kind of sat me down and said, okay, so let me get this right. You went to Duke. You've got a job that pays you no money. I said, yeah. And he said, so how does that make sense? And this is from a guy who came here with not a lot of money, and started his tortilla business, and just his path has just been like just work hard and right. And so I said, yeah, you're right. And I had these student loans come up, and he knew it, but I didn't ask him like, hey, I need your help in helping me pay these loans off, right? So I ended up taking a job. And by the way, a funny story of my time doing brokerage. You're going to laugh. So I was telling this story earlier this week. So I didn't have a car, right? So I get the job, and again, I get the job in August of 2004. And my dad's like, okay, you're doing this brokerage thing, okay. And he's not a real estate guy, so he had no idea. I think he was just like, he didn't even ask me, like, are you going to make money? And I remember I was like, hey, so I need a vehicle, right? And my dad never bought me a car in high school. My dad's old school, like, hey, you got to figure it out, right? Yeah. I'll help you, like, as necessary. And he was fine financially to help me. And I grew up fine. I didn't grow up sort of, and so I ended up borrowing one of the tortilla delivery vans. And so I was telling somebody earlier this week that I literally, I'd put on my suit that I got at Men's Warehouse, which I'm sure looked like shit, on me, but I thought it looked great.
Yeah.
I wish I had a picture of, I'm sure how I looked. So I'd get in my tortilla van and I'd drive all the way to Midway in LBJ from DeSoto because I lived at my parents' house.
Yeah.
And so I'd get to the office smelling like tortilla chips because my dad would sometimes, I mean, there were boxes of product in the van, right? And he had other delivery vehicles, but he's like, just grab one and you could use that to go to work. And so it was interesting looking back now, like I sort of thought it was just kind of normal. I was like, okay, well, I just need a car. I need to get to work.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I ended up, after going through that whole experience and driving, in a tortilla delivery van and going to appointments and showing shopping center space and office space. I'd be pulling up in a tortilla van, get out in my suit. People would be like, what else do you sell?
Want to buy a watch?
What else do you do? So anyway, it was certainly very humbling moment during that period. But I ended up getting a salary job because I had these student loans, and I was like, man, I didn't want to ask my dad for. I had this pride, right, and ego. Obviously, I was like, I'm just gonna go figure it out. My dad figured it out. My dad came here to another country, didn't even speak the language, and figured it out evidently. Yeah. So I ended up getting a salary at like Grand Plaza, this mall in South Fort Worth. And it was, when I got hired, it was 90% vacant, 10% occupied. It was a mall built by Home Art Development, which was Sears' development arm back in the 50s, I think.
Okay.
Pretty cool mall back in the day. I've talked to people that went, as little kids, and I guess it was like the place to be.
Right.
So just south of TCU. And so I was there for 3 years, and I learned a ton, man. It was a great experience.
Just leasing up all the spaces there?
I did leasing, and I got the job too because part of the comp that I got was I got a company car. So I got out of my tortilla van.
Hey, you figured it out.
So I got a Jeep Cherokee, a Grand Cherokee, and I drove that from DeSoto, went to I-20 all the way to Fort Worth every day. And I did that, and I leased space. And so I got there, and it was interesting. Like, we officed in the basement. So the mall offices were in the basement. And I think back in the day, I'm sure there's a few malls with basements that are out there. But that's where like the leasing and management offices were, right? Yeah. And I remember I hated it because I would park, and I had a BlackBerry at the time, if you remember, right? Yeah. And I'd go down to the basement, and there would be no service.
Oh.
And I'd be like, "Oh man, I went from making no money and driving the tortilla van in my fancy suit to now taking a job in Fort Worth and being in the dungeon, I would call it. No cell service." So anyway, I did that. It was fun. I'll say again, I say this not as a complaint, but I think a lot of those little experiences made me who I am today, right? Yeah. So it was not easy. And so I did the mall thing. I tell people that I did the mall thing when malls were cool. People were still talking about building malls back then.
Yeah.
Obviously, no one even says that today,
no.
Right? And so I did that for a few years, got the mall leased. We kind of built a team. Were able to get Burlington Coat Factory, Ross Dress for Less. They actually had a concept called Didi's, which is sort of a lower end concept than Ross, believe it or not. And learned a ton. I was able to negotiate. That's really where I learned, like, I would say fundamentally, like a core part of who I am today and why I think I'm a pretty good investor is leasing. Like fundamentally, leasing was. Yeah. I mean, I literally was given a blank canvas. It was literally like we had 1 million square feet of vacancy, and I didn't have a manual. It was just, we need some warm bodies in here.
Yeah.
And we had a plan to redevelop it, and it was a mall that if you go today, it's very vibrant. It's a great story, truly, truly a great story. It was redeveloped, and we tailored it to the growing sort of Hispanic Mexican population that was in South Fort Worth, right? Yeah. So Seminary and 35. And the mall had gone through its obviously era of, again, at the peak, went through kind of a lower income, very rough period where there was a lot of gang violence sort of in the 80s, 90s. Yeah. And then at the time when I was there, you started having more stability, and the mall was interesting because I literally did. My boss at the time, a guy named Jose Legaspi, who's kind of known as the master, the know-it-all of Hispanic retail. He was in California, so it was interesting. He was in LA, didn't even live here.
Yeah.
So he would come every couple of weeks. He had 2 partners here. And so I just kind of figured it out. And he said, look, there's a bunch of vacancy. Go cut deals.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing deals with, it was interesting, like people from every culture, every country imaginable. Got my ass kicked in my first negotiation by a guy from Pakistan. Totally just took me to the cleaners. But it was interesting. It was just kind of like, I was able to do percentage rent deals, able to do 1-year leases, 2-year leases, whatever. We were just like,
just get bodies.
Let's just get bodies in. Let's get it full. Let's and then while that was happening, we were putting a new facade on the outside. So if you go to the mall today, it kind of looks like, if you're familiar with like San Miguel de Allende, which is a town in central Mexico, it's pretty neat. So you go to the mall and you're like, wow, this looks great. I mean, so they put a ton of money into the mall. We put a massive marketing program. The weekends were it was like a big party, big fiesta. and then Fiesta Supermarket's there. So anyway, the mall's been a great story. So I did that, went to, left when the mall was like 80% occupied. Mm-hmm. So I got there, it was 80-90% vacant. So I mean, we totally kind of flipped the script there. Yeah. It was pretty neat. And then I was ready to do something else. So I went and worked with Sid Hurley, who I consider a great guy, one of the smart guys, I think, in the business. He had done target developments before with his previous company called Direct Development. And I was there, and within a year, this was like 2007, the market crashes. Yeah. And I was just cheap labor. I was the low guy in the totem pole, so I didn't get canned, or I didn't get my salary cut because I was the cheap guy and the young guy. So whatever. And that was obviously a tough period if you were in the business, I'm sure at the time, and it was really hard. It was.
I was
really
doing property management at the time, and it was everybody we were working out reduced rents, and all those things, and it was hard. So it's interesting because so Sid was the company, which is still around. It's a company called Vista Property Company, and he did Hispanic retail. So I went from going to the mall, which is Hispanic retail, to Vista, which that's all we did. Yeah, and the Hispanic pockets got hit pretty hard. Everyone got hit pretty hard, right? But I just remember it was like, man, I mean, I got there with the idea that we were going to buy all these shopping centers, and then it just kind of stopped, right? Mm-hmm. He had a few centers at the time, and just to lease whatever, a 1,200 square foot space, right? A 5,000, whatever. It was like really, 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 really hard. Yeah. Not just like basic blocking and tackling, going and knocking on a door physically and like talking to a human. Mm-hmm. It was like you're at an intersection with 2 other shopping centers, and we had sometimes the vacant anchor because we redeveloped a few centers down in Pleasant Grove and Oak Cliff. And so it was extremely hard. Yeah. Harder than I think general retail was at the time. So, so I got into leasing industrial in 2010. So coming right off of it. And I mean, it was, we were giving buildings away. Like
I've heard.
You got a year of free rent.
I've heard.
I lease buildings on a gross basis for what OpEx are today. $250 gross, $2 gross.
Yeah.
Just
what's interesting is the mall. So remember, I started at a dead mall.
Yeah.
So I kind of had my own crisis before.
Yeah.
My own GFC.
Yeah. You started at the bottom.
I was like, well, I leased the mall that was, dead, vacant. Yeah. The market crashes, and I'm like, okay, here we go again, right? Like, so it didn't faze me. It was looking back at it now. It was like, it was like I was put in these situations that have again prepared me very well to who I am today. Right. I mean, at the time, it sucked. I was like, there were many times where I was like, I'm just going to get out of this business. Like, this is not a good business for me. I talked to my buddies on Wall Street. They were working for all these big shops, whatever, consulting jobs. I mean, everyone from Duke goes to either New York, Boston, Atlanta. Sure. Nobody came to Dallas, by the way.
Yeah.
Nobody. Dallas was like, "You're going to Dallas, right? Like, what are you doing? Going to ride some horses? Like, what do you guys do over there?"
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
and now it's flipped. Now, now you say Dallas, everybody wants to come to Dallas, right?
Back then, like Dallas was kind of like almost a tier 2 city.
Yeah.
Like,
no, you're right. It was a tier 2 city.
Yeah.
It was. I think Houston had more of a, attraction to it than Dallas.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, let's see. So I did when I was with Sid, I was there. I ended up, doing some brokerage. So I had my license because I got my license when I was a Coldwell banker. So I still kind of kept it up. And I had my license, and I remember I told Sid, I said, "Well, the business is slow, and I've got to make money. I've got student loans I got to pay off."
Mm-hmm.
And I think at the time, I lived in an apartment at the time. I moved out of my parents, so I had that expense too.
Yeah.
And I ended up just working brokerage deals. I told Sid, I was like, "Look, I got to go make some money. I got to go figure it out." And he's like, "Do it." And so I ended up becoming sort of a tenant rep broker, project leasing, and Sid got, for Vista, they ended up getting a bunch of third-party property management, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was hard. And then, so I did brokerage, and I remember I was like, man, I don't know that this is what I want to do. I mean, it was, I'd get frustrated by a lot of the things that I think, brokers go through. And some of it was probably my ego telling me, I was like, I'd try to convince somebody to do a very basic lease or sell, and I'd be like, man, don't you just see it? Like, it's very clear. You should just buy it for this or do that, right?
Yeah.
And so that part of me, that restlessness drove me to say, you know what? I've been on the principal side. I'm going to go do that again.
Yeah.
So I ended up, so I had connected with Fernando de Leon, who started Leon Capital when I was at the mall. And then we reconnected sort of, I think it was 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
So I ended up joining him, and it was just Fernando, Will Tolliver, I think David Kokenauer at the time. And we were sort of the first guys that started there. And I was there for 7-8 years.
Yeah.
No longer, I guess, 9 years. And we built a great company. Did I don't know, 300 retail deals.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
And we opened offices across the country. I was in Charlotte, as I mentioned. So I was in Charlotte last week, and with someone on my retail team, someone on my industrial team. So I reconnected. Now that I'm sort of jumping back into retail, reconnecting with some of those old retail connections. So it was great. Met a lot of great people at the company. Learned a lot. It was, it was a great time to be in the business just because money was cheap and dollars were flowing. And it was like, man, go, go, go. Right?
Yeah.
So did that. We had a big team of about 50 people.
Yeah.
At the time on the retail team alone. So we did everything from grocery anchored centers to strip centers to single tenant deals. I mean, we did a lot of work with your usual suspects, right?
Sure.
Your Chick-fil-A's and Raising Cane's and your 7-Elevens of the world and all those guys. So it was a good experience. The company, it was interesting. 2019, I think I've told you this story. So I had the benefit of, our sandbox was not just Dallas or Texas.
Yeah.
Our sandbox was
United States,
like a big part of the country.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you also own deals in Europe.
Yeah. Well, that was a JV with Hillwood.
That
was a JV with Hillwood. And so we ended up on the retail side. We did it all. We did big box redevelopment. We did single tenant ground up deals. We did redevelopment of strip centers. Kind of did a lot of it. And it was in 2019, like I'd started noticing margins it was getting harder. Everything was getting harder. Capital was still cheap, but we were getting more we had more competition. Mm-hmm. We ended up competing with other people that were new outfits, and we were doing deals for very little spread. It was just doing this.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what, this just doesn't work. And then I had a meeting at ICSC. You know, I was doing every ICSC. I mean, I think a couple of years I did every regional ICSC conference, like San Diego, Chicago, like Orlando, all of them. And so I ended up just kind of seeing, I was like, you know what, like it's just getting harder. And I went to 2019 ICSC, and I've said this story many times, but I sat down with the head of real estate for Firestone, and I had 7 or 8 pads at the time. And we had preferred developers of theirs reach out to us wanting to buy the pads. And we ended up, and so for me, it was very easy. I said, you know, I have a construction team, I have estimators, I have a full development team, deal guys. Yeah. Like we should just do those deals direct, right? I don't need to go sell it to a developer. So I want to be a Firestone preferred developer. I ended up setting up a meeting at ICSC with the head of real estate. You know, if you've been to ICSC, and I know you have, I've seen you, I don't know if you've been to the Vegas one, but it's truly like, and back in the day, in those years too, it's even like, I mean, this was like kind of peak of the market. I mean, everyone's swamped. I mean, you get very little time with anyone, and it's like speed dating, right? And so you get these 30-minute slots to meet with somebody. And the guy at Firestone, you know, I guess blessed me with 30 minutes of his time, right? Because we met, and he was, you know, very arrogant, like your typical, like, hey, I'm a big retailer that gets a lot of deals done. Sure. Like, you know, you're just another developer. Like, what do you want, right? And I quickly realized in those first few minutes that we were not going to be able to do business with the guy. Yeah. He basically said, I need you to do, if you want to be a developer for us, you gotta do these deals for little to no spread. Yeah. And he pulled out sort of his investment sales little sheet. And I tell when I meet investment sales guys that I've told this story to, I said, he basically thought he was you. Like he tried to educate me on Firestone cap rates and what they were and what they were going to be and all these things. I was just sitting here saying, man, the business fundamentally has changed a lot from when I got into business in 2004 to where there was no data. Like, you know, if you got a Firestone deal done in 2004, it was probably at a 12 cap or who knows. And the only person that knew what the yield was going in was the developer and the guy, the Marcus and Millichap broker probably at the time, right? Because Marcus and Millichap was around back then. And so I came back from that Vegas conference having had that meeting, and we were already kind of struggling to source enough deals. We were like, man, it's just getting harder and harder, right? Yeah. And Fernando and I sat down and we spoke, and I said, man, my deal team is like, it's really hard to get this, to keep the team that we have. Deal flow is slowing, and this is what we have to do now. We have to basically agree to be happy with 100 basis points of spread.
It's pretty thin.
You're not going to do it, right? And at the time in 2019, everyone kind of generally knew we had a really good run, and people were like, "When is the shoe going to drop? Right? When is this going to crash?" Right. So people were there were whispers of it at the time. No one obviously kind of could have predicted COVID, right?
Sure.
And so that happened, and we ended up, you know, starting to sell a lot of assets, and we ended up laying some people off, you know, and it was unfortunate. Obviously, it's hard because we had some great people, but we laid some people off, and then I personally said, you know what? I've got to go look at some other asset class. I got to learn something else, and this is where industrial comes in, right? And so I was always sort of intrigued by it, curious about it. Again, growing up in the food manufacturing space. And so I ended up just towards my end of my time at Leon Capital, cold calling, networking, meeting people like you and, you know, reaching out, some of the Lee and Associates guys, just getting out there. Yeah. And so I left in January of 20. Yeah. And talk about a hard time to start a business. So I started in January, and COVID was already, there were, you know, I think at the time there were whispers in China that there was this virus, and it was pretty serious, and you know, and I think when Trump shut the border, it was like April-ish. I think March.
I was on spring break with my kids at Universal Studios, like standing in a huge line, right? Like I remember getting on like one of the Harry Potter rides, and the next day the world shut down. Like they were like, they shut the park down, they shut everything down. It was, you know,
so it was
mid-March.
It was hard. It was hard. Again, I told you a little bit about sort of the beginnings of my career. And I remember sitting there thinking, okay, I'm going to go do industrial.
Yeah.
I've now got to go meet industrial people. I've got to let people know that I'm doing industrial now.
Yeah.
That Jesus,
and you can't go physically meet
Jesus Araiza, who had been doing retail for 15 years, right, is now doing industrial.
Yeah.
And so I still remember having a meeting. I would pick up the phone. I was just cold calling companies because I took sort of a retail playbook approach to industrial, and that's a big part of our business still. But I was calling tenants and I was calling brokers, and I was bullshitting my way around, just trying to get people to talk to me and meet with me. And I remember the first meeting I had that was sort of a real industrial meeting. I flew to Memphis and met with the director of real estate for True Green.
Yeah.
And we were in a conference room spread out with masks, the whole deal.
Yeah.
And it was a tough time, right? Because I was like, here I am, no income, no salary. I was just starting from scratch in a new business, right? That fundamentally similar to retail, but just a different set of players and rules. And so, and today we're so Armada Capital started then in a very hard time for a lot of people, obviously, and for us too. And today we have we're a team of 5, and we have two industrial guys, Matt Ornstein and Mike Knudsen, 2 great guys. And we have on the retail side, Colby Clapper, who came from Getty REIT, and she joined last year when I decided it was time to jump back into retail.
Yeah.
And then Kylie Fox joined us. She graduated from UT. She's a sponge. She's just one of these young, wants to learn everything, and she's awesome. So we have a great team.
That's cool.
So we've bought 50-something properties, single tenant industrial. Have not bought we actually bought one retail deal, about a Firestone, interestingly, that I found off market in Connecticut. And we did a blend and extend and tripled their rent. So that Firestone guy that I met at ICSC, is no longer there, by the way.
Of course, right?
He's no longer there.
I gotta imagine the real estate directors for like a pretty prominent company like that. Everybody's kissing their ass and all that, and but they come and go. It's
oh man, And the lifespan of some of these guys, and there's some great guys in the business. I mean, I've become friends with a lot of them, but it's like you learn you learn like just be nice to people, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a small world at the end of the day.
It's a very
small world. You want to be an
world.
Asshole, like you're going to get the asshole treatment, and it's going to impact your business. So it's not that hard to do the right thing and to be a good person.
I think that's the one thing that has helped me have other brokers sell me buildings who were my competitors for so long, because I was just never an asshole to them. I was always decent to deal with as a competitor, but never confrontational or like that.
Just treat people right. It's not that hard.
Something I want to talk about, because you and I started to talk about this on the floor of ICSC, but there's so much going on we don't have really time to talk about. So, we've gotten into the retail game, but really just providing capital for developers. Not truly outright owning retail and being an operator, and I don't know that we'll ever do anything like that. I think providing capital is where we feel pretty comfortable. But we saw at ICSC the first time was just the efficiency of that meeting, right? And so now I look at the 2 verticals we play in, our value add industrial stuff, B and C class, very similar. We buy very similar stuff. And then the retail side. So I look at ICSC. ICSC is like the most efficient real estate meeting I've ever seen happen. The real estate directors of every ABC, A through Z tenant is on the perimeter, and the interior is the developers and the brokers. And the brokers are telling the tenant what their credit's trading at currently, so they know that the developer's got to have spread to build their building. So I mean, it's the talk about the information is just wildly nailed down in that industry, you know, which compresses spread in a way. It kind of fixes it in a way. I feel like, you know, developers can make some money if they buy land right and, you know, and buy larger parcels and cut them up. But when they're buying just truly pads to build for somebody, I feel like, you know, it's kind of a fixed game, you know. Then you have the industrial side where there's still a lot of unknown out there, right? That's where you can make some real arbitrage, I think, in a deal. But I think those stones are getting uncovered, are turned over, right? So, you know, I in my brokerage career, I was always a iOS broker, I guess, right? That term didn't exist. Like, none of these investors would touch a building on 5 acres. They'd turn their nose up at that. And, you know, I would sell them to local guys. I would lease them, And what I realized was it was so hard to lease them because not one broker tracked any of this stuff. A laydown yard. I mean, I had a yard on Irving Boulevard, and I leased it like 4 or 5 times over, just extra truck parking, right? You know, and but no one advertised those things, right? Now, if I want to look up iOS or low coverage sites, I mean, every brokerage house now has a team they're the iOS team. We were working on a deal the other day. We ended up terminating it, and it was like a $3 million deal. And the 800-pound gorilla of iOS calls us for a reliance letter on our phase 1. I'm like, man, y'all are dipping down to this deal size. So what I'm getting at is I think there's an interesting discussion to think about efficient versus inefficient markets. And I feel like retail's in this extremely efficient market. B&C Industrial's extremely inefficient, but is trending very closely towards being extremely efficient. Correct. And I don't know, it makes me nervous a lot of times. I'm like, man, when is so? Because if you buy a building and do all the work, I'm not your buyer. Right. And vice versa. Right. You know what I mean? Right. And so I just kind of wonder at some point, do we run out of things to work on because everybody turns these stones over? Oh, man.
Yes. So retail's very efficient, mature market. Everyone knows kind of what the other person does. Yeah. You could, I mean, I think that was the biggest reason when I look at retail, why I got out of it to a degree. Part of it, I said the first time, right? When I got out, I was like, the difference in 19 versus 04 was like retailers now have the upper hand. They know what this became a merchant development business where developers were just coming in and it was in and out, in and out, in and out. So retailers got smart. They just said, you know what? We need to know what we're worth.
They unionized.
And so, well, to a degree, right? They all said, we need to know. And the investment sales guys certainly kind of helped, right?
Sure.
Like that whole process happened. And so, yes, retail is very efficient, and industrial is headed that way, and it's going to continue to happen. And our portfolio is iOS, and we own a lot of iOS. And you know, industrial's more commoditized. Certainly, you know, I have meetings every day with my team, and you know, 1 minute I'm looking at an intersection, high traffic intersection, and we're looking at access points, and we're looking at visibility, and are you on the morning side or the afternoon side, and who are the main drivers of that intersection, right? Is it Costco? Is it Tom Thumb? Who is it? Yeah. And in industrial, it's just okay, is the building functional?
I call it form, fit, and function.
Like that's functional, what it is. Yeah. Highway access, like, you know, how quickly can you get? Like, I mean, I think the business industrial is becoming more efficient. You have more technology jumping in to help industrial tenants like make the right decision. Right. But it's kind of harder. It's going to continue to get harder. The industrial. Now, I'll say that I think it's been cooling off. Yeah. Right. Like the iOS space, we were in Charlotte and we had 16 meetings in 2 days. Met with retail and industrial people and brokers and I think some of those big guys, you know, some of those institutional guys, which I'm sure I can guess, you know, who it would beat. They're having a hard time, and I think this hyped up iOS thing is now cooling down. And I don't see those players like really. They're having a pivot. I think they have to go figure out what else they do.
Well, I think too. So I look back at leasing when I leased iOS sites. When I put one on the market, it leased immediately because no one marketed that stuff.
Yeah.
You can now, I had a deal we were taking to market, and I had the broker give me a competitive set, and I was like, there's a bunch of options because people are working on this stuff now. And,
it got hyped up like a lot of asset classes, right? So, and I think there's a peak, and I think we're now kind of feeling the effects of, okay, you buy iOS, like the real fundamentals now start to be important, right?
Huge.
Like, are you on the right highway? Are you priced right?
Yeah.
And obviously, are you priced right from a leasing standpoint? All depends on your basis.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Like how quickly, how far down in flexibility you have on your lease rate to come down.
Yeah,
it's all a function of your basis.
It totally is.
Right.
That's
obviously,
we're
basis and cost of capital, right? Your debt service.
Yeah.
And so I think it's become harder and becoming harder for everybody. But industrial, you've been in the business, like traditional industrial, I think is more efficient than iOS industrial. And I think iOS industrial is becoming more efficient. So industrial certainly has its inefficiencies, but I can't tell you how many retail brokers I've met that are now doing industrial. Or retail developers that are now doing industrial.
I believe it.
Like, it is what it is. So there's more competition, and those people are bringing best practices to industrial, kind of like how we did.
Yeah.
So and retail is very nuanced. You're very precise. Like the reality, I tell my team on the industrial side, sometimes when we get a deal get killed by one of our tenants, I'm like, guys, you don't understand. If this was McDonald's, like McDonald's has, they're a real estate company, right?
Yeah,
That's what they
exactly.
are, really.
Yeah.
And they've got, their internal team running all the metrics, not just fundamentals on the real estate, but sales data and projections and labor costs and all that stuff. Like, if something's off, like, they just won't do the deal. They don't have to do the deal.
Right.
McDonald's takes that approach, right? You should. So does Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, that corner, if we can't have it today, we don't need it.
Right.
And if it cannibalizes our store over here, an extra 5%, and our threshold was that, we're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And you spend all this time working on the deal, you tie up the site sometimes, and you think you have a McDonald's deal. Once it goes through the McDonald's, snake in the system internally, sometimes, you've seen the retail leases now. There's a reason why they have so much due diligence period up front.
Yeah.
They need the time to do their analysis internally, and they just want to go tie it up, and then they want time to figure out, is this deal good for me or not?
So for those points exactly that you just made is why we will never be a retail operator.
Yeah.
I'm relying on...
I can see that.
I'm relying on the developer having track record, and then to your point, the tenant that he has in tow.
Yeah.
They have a sophisticated real estate department. So those are two of my big tests. Like, okay, you like it, Mr. Developer? Great. And Chipotle likes it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's a lot of eyes on this.
I agree. I would just tell you, be careful though, because I've been through the gauntlet as a developer on the retail side. Definitely had plenty of cost overruns that we thought we were going to make $500,000, $1 million, whatever, and you made as much money as the tenant rep broker that you paid, to do the deal.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, there are real risks there, and I think part of retail's great in that the barriers to entry are really low. Like, if you want to go be a pad site developer, and pads are costing, I don't know, $1.5 million, $2 million, right? Used to be $800,000, $1 million. It's a little more now, land appreciation and whatnot. But anyone can go to Dallas Country Club or your country club, whatever, go raise a few bucks and go buy the asset or take control of it. So it's really a process there on the single tenant side that you've got to really make sure you know who you're dealing with as a equity provider, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of good sponsors out there, but you're as a developer, you're the optimist.
Right.
And you're always trying to be
optimist.
like, oh yeah, we're going to sell this at this cap rate. And I've generally been, I'm an optimist, but I'm relatively conservative, right?
Yeah.
I try not to make, too many mistakes. We've all made mistakes, but so that would be my advice, right?
Yeah.
It's a great business, but there's a lot of guys out there that, and the thing is, your margin of error too is pretty thin.
Yeah.
Because these deals are so small.
Yeah. No, they are.
You have a big bust on site work, and there goes your profit.
Yeah.
And now you're just working to get your money back.
Right. No, it doesn't come. It doesn't come without risk. I feel like the good thing is though that they usually will tie the site up for a very long time and have a lot of that due diligence done, and the real estate, the tenant has done a lot of, because we won't fund a deal unless there's a signed lease in place. Well,
it should be a hard signed lease.
A hard signed lease. Explain the difference.
That's the difference.
Well, I mean, I guess permitting, right? If they don't get a permit.
Yeah. Permit. That's what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing that's kind of harder. So cities are going to give you a permit, but sometimes it's a permit with a bunch of changes to your drawings that make the cost now, too prohibitive.
Yeah.
So a signed lease is not enough, in my opinion.
Yeah. How do you get them to sign a hard signed lease? They have to want the site bad enough.
It's hard. Well, they won't. They just won't. Like you'll never convince McDonald's or Chick-fil-A to give you a lease that they sign, and they're like, okay, that's good. Like
if it doesn't work,
assuming that we're getting permits, and it's like, retailers got so good about putting language in their leases where it's a little nebulous, and there's some gray areas to if they don't get what they want exactly, they can still get out.
Yeah.
And so you got to be careful. I mean, I can sit here and talk to you about stories on, again, we did several hundred deals, and we had, some deals blow up, and some of it was city related. Some of it, the tenant try to bullshit their way, get out of it, make an excuse to get out. So that time period that a lot of these tenants have up front for permitting periods, I think they call it that. It's also a period for them to figure out if they still want to do the deal.
Yeah. So what do you do with your site if they get out? I mean, usually...
If you've closed on it?
If you've closed on it, I mean, you got to go turn around and sell it or get another tenant in tow, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's hard.
But you've probably purchased some fundamentally decent real estate, right?
We did it, and we got bailed out on a few deals, when I was doing that. But basis, it's basis,
all basis,
right? And then who's your lender and who's your equity, and can they give you another shot? Because you thought you were delivering McDonald's or Chipotle, and now it's Jesus's Taqueria, right? At a 10 cap.
That's right. So, no, it's a space where we're learning every day in it, but we're just really trying to saddle ourselves with guys that have way more experience than we do at it. So we're just,
it's a great space. We're back in it because I think there's opportunity there.
Yeah. So. Well, okay. So you've probably made a bunch of cold calls in your life.
Tons.
What's your most awkward cold call?
Yeah, that's on your list of questions.
It is.
Oh man, I don't. So when I was at the mall, I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot. There were a lot again at the mall. I remember I called the Dillard's real estate director.
Yeah.
I think Dillard's was in the mall before, like in the 70s or something. And I remember he told me, kept calling, and he wouldn't return my call. Finally, he picked up. I caught him somehow, and picks up the phone, and I give him my pitch, tell him who I was. Obviously, he knew because I'd been leaving voicemails. And I think he responded something like to the effect of, I would never touch that pig again. And I was like, whoa. And they were, so it was hard. Like, think about it. I was at a mall where all the tenants had previously been. Yeah. Like national guys. Yeah. Here I was calling them to come back.
Yeah. Come on. You want to run it back? Let's go, baby.
Run it back. So I don't know that I've had I've been in strange places, bazaars. And I mean, when I was leasing space at the mall and even with Sid for shopping centers, I mean, a lot of the areas that I went to were, Hispanic areas. Some of these not the safest, and but I grew up in Oak Cliff, so to me, none of that stuff kind of fazed me. But I've seen all sorts of illegal activity, happening back when I was doing that stuff, and you just keep driving,
right? Yeah. If you have a prospect in the car, you go, "Oh, hey, look at that!"
But I've seen it all. I'm sure, like you have. You go into buildings. Sometimes you see the homeless guy. Sometimes you see I've seen it. I had a tenant in one of our strip centers. One of the first buildings we bought when I was at Leon Capital. I went in to tell him his rent was going up because his lease was coming up. Mm-hmm. It was a local pizza guy, and he fucking burned the building down the next day. How about that? He lit it on fire.
That probably worked out for y'all.
Oh man, dealing with insurance. The only part that didn't burn was the O'Reilly because they had a firewall. But we got a call from the O'Reilly manager, and he said it was like 5 a.m. The building's on fire. Fire department was there, but they found that there was a accelerant in the broom closet. So the guy had clearly dumped fuel or whatever, and that's where he lit it on fire. So,
man, I tell you what, we've bought a lot of these business parks where we have to have those conversations, and man, it is just.
I know you. I think I can tell you which business park probably.
That one worked out. It's kind of funny. That one we had 185,000 feet of industrial. We tell everybody their new rent. The pitchforks come out. We lost 70,000 feet of the park. But the renewals we did exceeded the NOI we had when we were 100% occupied.
Wow.
And then we filled it up after that. So,
it was good real estate. It's good real estate. So.
Yeah, it worked. But I mean, we're going through it right now with some people renewing that we bought a deal where they had a year left on their lease, and we're coming up to it now, and they're just,
It's a hard leasing space is again, and I think one of your questions, I'll bring this up now, that you asked was what do you know now that you didn't know before, or what's a surprise?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that I thought knowing the numbers was going to be fundamentally more important as an investor.
Yeah.
Like creating a model, building a model, like just understanding, all the metrics.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that I think it's understanding the complexities of leasing a building, because we buy buildings that are leased, but I assume that they may go vacant.
Yeah.
That's just the risk that I have to assume that every day, right?
Sure.
It could be a bankruptcy, it could be whatever. And so when you go in and you buy a building, you've got to pick it apart. And you've got to poke holes through it, and you kind of have to be very cynical about it.
Yeah.
So, leasing, I think if you have a fundamental understanding of leasing, I think everyone who I was giving a young person career advice who wants to get in this business, just do leasing for a little bit, try it out. I'm sure it helped you a lot. That's what's made you a really good investor as well.
Property management.
Yeah.
Enforcing the lease. I started off enforcing the lease, and then when I went to tenant rep, I knew how to fight the enforcement of the lease. And so, I totally agree. That's an area that everybody needs to focus on. So,
well, I mean, all your formulas when you're sitting there with your analysts underwriting a deal, right? Your assumptions, right? Like anyone can go to CoStar and say, "Oh, CoStar rent says this." You make a few calls and you call a few brokers, and they say this, but fundamentally, you have to have experienced, I think, leasing. Like leasing space that sucks. Teaches you a lot. It's really hard to lease.
Well, that's one thing when I talk to new brokers, I'm like, don't ever bring me anything that's 12 foot clear. It will not lease. It will not lease or sell. You'll never get out of it.
Yes.
So
that's correct.
That's a big, but I mean, every 12 foot listing I ever had, I got fired on.
Oh, man.
Just couldn't get it done. No one wants it, So, well, what are you working on right now that you're most excited about?
We've got a great team. I don't have any particular deal. I mean, we're working on a handful of retail. I was in Oklahoma earlier this week, as I mentioned, and we met with a grocery chain up there. That was exciting. And that could, I could sit here and say I'm super excited about those potential deals. or this particular industrial deal we're looking at. I love mentoring people.
Yeah.
Like I'll be honest, like I'm pretty involved at my old school, St. Mary of Carmel, and just kind of being there and helping kids. I had some pretty good people help me.
Yeah.
And so we have a great team, and I spend a lot of time with them. They probably think I speak too much at times during meetings. I had my New York person that runs Retail Colby, who's done awesome, tell me after a Charlotte meeting, I need you to zip your lips. You talk too much. I said, okay, sorry. And but as she tells people, I'm probably one of the most excited people in retail today.
Yeah.
You know, just jumping back in and seeing some of the things. But anyway, so that, you know, building a team and then hopefully building a company that lasts, you know, forever and you know, that gets me up every day and it's just every day it's a new puzzle, it's a new deal to look at.
Yeah. And
so we're doing some other interesting things. Like I'm involved in a logistics trucking business that we'll talk about another time. But so I'm involved in that business, and then I made an offer to buy a tortilla business.
Taking it back to the old school.
My dad's largest competitor, who's here in town. You know, we made an offer on it, about a $50 million deal. We'll see if we can get it done.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's a manufacturing, awesome. It's a business with some real estate. So
real estate.
Those are exciting things, you know, as well. But
that's cool.
Building a team and having a team that, you know, is great in the culture, like that part, we've focused a lot on culture and having a good team of people. And so it's been great. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you may have answered this, but what is something that no one knows about?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I learned, I thought about this question, and I guess, I don't know. I mean, I learned English in kinder, you know, there's a lot of things that people, I mean, I don't know. When I was, when I was born, so I'm an anchor baby.
Yeah.
I'll say that. When I was born, my mom was here on a tourist visa. Not a lot of people know that. So I've got, you know, a very clear understanding of the whole immigration problem. And I kind of was aware of it because I would cross the border with my dad, who had his green card.
Yeah.
And that was hard because my mom would have to walk the bridge and we would be in the car. My parents didn't want to be seen together because they were always concerned that they wouldn't renew my mom's tourist visa.
Yeah.
And that was hard, but this country's awesome. I love this country.
Yeah.
I take a no bullshit, no excuses approach.
Yeah.
I think that's why you and I connected too. I think we both, you know, it's a meritocracy. Like at the end of the day, my dad wasn't given anything. I wasn't given anything. You just kind of, people figure it out.
Yeah.
And so this country has, as someone that's spent time in Mexico, I've spent time in Chile, I've seen other countries and have tried to do business in other countries.
Yeah.
And I've spent a lot of time in similar countries. Like, you know, there's no perfect place.
Yeah.
The U.S. is certainly not perfect.
Yeah.
And this is certainly not a political statement, but again, I take a no bullshit approach, and you can do anything you want in this country.
Absolutely.
I mean, anything you want.
Absolutely. Well, man, it's been we could probably sit here and go.
Yeah.
We could probably go for an hour. I know.
You know,
it's part two.
This is awesome. By the way, this is my first one of these
podcasts.
It was interesting. My son, you know, coincidentally this week, one of his school projects was doing a podcast.
Yeah.
So I told him this morning, I said, I'm going to go do a podcast.
That's awesome.
You know, and he was like, what? Really? Like, are you being recorded? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we got the exclusive. We got the first one.
So anyway, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I really have enjoyed sitting here talking to you, and we could talk for hours.
Oh, no. I love every time we start talking about our minds think a lot alike, and so we always have incredible conversations about the real estate market.
You have a great team, man, and you've built something great, and I think I think there's some good times ahead of us in the business.
Absolutely.
In retail and in industrial.
Yeah.
They're two great asset classes. So there's going to be a lot for everyone to do out there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jesus Araiza, everybody. Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Absolutely.
This has been great.